Warning, this video involves math and spreadsheets. If your eyes glaze over, do not exit the video. Skip to about 22.5 minutes in for the takeaways, or check the description for the timestamp below. The Morellonomicon vs Liandry's debate has been raging for quite a while now. Initially, people were building Morellos too often, but now it's kind of gone the other way and people are building Liandry's way too often. In this video, I want to answer two questions. First off, when is it correct to build Morellos? And second, how did we get here? We'll be using specific in-game situations and moving from when it should be pretty obvious to less obvious. A lot of the discussion around Morellos involves grievous wounds and healing reduction, but we're actually going to ignore that until the end and just focus on damage. I had our stats team cook me up a damage calculator. Now I know this is overwhelming, so let me walk you through it. The way this works is you plug in your target's HP, magic resist, what your combo's base damage is, the AP ratio, how much AP you actually have, without including Morellos or Liandry's, because this calculator will already put those values in. Same with your flat pen. I have Sorc shoes, but I don't need to put my Morellos flat pen in because it will already add that in as well. If I had Void Staff, I'd add it in here, or any other kind of stat altering effects would go in here. So those are my inputs. My outputs come out here, and I know it looks a little confusing, but the numbers to really look at are the ones that have these kind of gradients. The bottom left corner is the lowest at 1 stack of madness from Liandry's and no burn yet. And then along the bottom row, the madness will increase up to 5 stacks of madness. Above it will be if you add the Liandry's burn on top. Morellos is much easier because it doesn't have any of this ramping effect, and it just gives you the 776 for what they expect the damage to be. So we should test to make sure this math is right. Let's go look at some examples in the practice tool. I have a QRE at a level 13 LeBlanc combo and a Luden's proc going off. I have just my Luden's and Sorc pen boots and the Morellos built on top. This gives me 178 AP. So I want to take the 70 out from the Morellos and put in 108. So there's my spell damage combo. I'm not going to show me adding that math all the time because I'll just bog this video down. There's the ratio, there's the AP. There's the flat pen, and it predicts 776.77, which will round up to 777. Cool, Morellos works. Let's make sure to check with the other things. This is my Liandry's combo done as quickly as I can to make sure it's only on 1 stack of madness, as you can see right here, and before any ticks of the burn have calculated. So let's see what it predicts. This actually predicts 3 higher. What's going on? Well, it's because my initial Q will be at 0 stacks of madness, and then my R and E will be. So this value is about 4 damage higher than what it really would be if I was bursting from no madness stacks. Now, that's a pretty negligible number, so I think we can just take this at its value. It is 4. You just have to keep these little things in mind. For completion's sake, we should check my max damage. Here, I've autoed this to get my madness ramping up to 5, and then I've done the same combo on the target dummy, and I've let the damage calculate from the Liandry's burn, 1063, and we got 1063. Cool. So it seems pretty straightforward, right? Well, there is actually a lot more gray area, and this math is very complicated because not only is the damage changing based off enemy MR and HP, it's also scaling with time, as madness needs 5 seconds to ramp. Don't forget that Liandry's also increases with movement in pairs and reapplies on new spell damage. And so while in this example, I got my spell combo out as fast as possible to get it as close to this initial value as I could. So 985 is the expected value, but I actually get 987. What's going on there? Well, even though all my burst and spell damage came out during the first stack of madness, as madness ticks up, my Liandry's damage is ticking up slightly as well. So this value is actually slightly higher than the expected value here, the same way this one was slightly lower than the expected value before I got a stack of madness. So what happens when I get a burst combo out a little bit slower than on just the first stack of madness? It looks a little bit something like this. I did do the full combo. I got it out before my Liandry's really stacked, despite the fact it says 5 madness there. I actually did this combo a lot faster and then was just slow taking the screenshot. But it was ended at 1032, and if we check the spreadsheet, 1032 is right between madness 3 and 4. So you start seeing that these gray areas come in not only with madness stacks, but how fast you're actually getting this combo out. Liandry's will usually finish with a higher damage overall because of this reason, but it's actually a lower DPS because you have to wait for all this damage to come out. We'll get into the difference between DPS and damage later on in the video and situations that might influence it. But it's important to note there's a lot of gray area here, because if I am doing my combo slow, my Q might come out on the first stack of madness, my E might come out on my fourth, and my second R might have come out on my second or third. And so it's very hard to actually calculate Liandry's damage, but we can approximate it like this. I did my combo relatively slow on LeBlanc there to see that it'll be between 3 and 4 on a slower burst combo. All of this is to say there's a lot of gray area with Liandry's, especially in burst situations. When I look at most of the math done on Liandry's online, it's not incorrect mathematically, but it ignores that gray area. I've seen this spreadsheet all over the place, and it just isn't gradient enough in really taking in the actual situations. It tends to use the highest madness burn with the target stunned the entire time for the duration of that burn. And while it does have some min or max values, people just tend to gravitate towards looking at the biggest one. And so that's why I want to look at specific in-game examples to see what combos people are actually using and what levels of madness they're getting to. So let's look at our first example. For some reason, Jensen has built a Liandry's versus a no tank, fairly low MR team comp. Let's look at the first example. I'll be using ProView pretty extensively here to be able to see exactly what's going on with people and get their MR and HP values for all these kinds of combos. We'll be using the damage calculator. So in this example, Jensen's going to blow Morellos up with a Q, E, and the auto will activate the electrocute. And that's all he's going to get to kill him. Super quick, right? I have a freeze frame to show you exactly what his madness is at the time. It's at 1 stack, so a very fast burst combo similar to that LeBlanc one I showed you, which had the minimum damage. I've kind of prepared all the different situations already, so you're gonna have to trust me that this is right. And so here we have Gragas' HP, his MR at that point. This is a QE electrocute proc. I did not include the auto because it's physical damage and it's gonna be relatively equal throughout. It is worth noting Liandry's will ramp physical damage through his madness passive, but as we saw, he barely ramped at all, and we saw that was about a 2 damage difference before when you're including differences in whether they have a stack or not of madness, so I think we can largely ignore it here. We have a 679.21 damage combo with this ridiculous AP ratio, and 195 because we've subtracted out the Liandry's 75 extra AP that we would see in his screenshot at 270. So assuming the fast LeBlanc combo area of where we can put this damage from Liandry's, it would actually be about here or here, depending on how much you want to give extra damage to the stun target. The Liandry's didn't tick very much, and you start getting this murky gray area, but you can kind of give it, let's say, the 807 damage for that combo. The Morellos is 806. It's a largely negligible difference, and I haven't even mentioned healing reduction. Let's take a look at another example earlier in the game. Jensen here hasn't completed his Liandry's yet, but I'll show you a way to mess with the spreadsheet to calculate the components of Oblivion Orb and Haunting Guise. But first, let's look at the combo he hits Gragas with. Gragas is going to face check him here, and he's going to hit him with a QE, 4-ball R, a GLP proc, as well as his electrocute went off. So, in my spreadsheet, I've already prepared this one as well. Gragas was only level 10 here as it was earlier in the game, and we're going to go drop that in here. And here. This is going to be a little technical, but if we subtract the difference in the Liandry's from his current AP, which is 75, and we plug in 100, we'll actually be able to ignore the burn part and only take madness because Haunting Guise has the madness part. So you can see here, these are the values that we're going to be looking at because we're not getting the Liandry's burn, but the damage is correct because this will be the correct end AP once we add in the 75 that is pre-factored into this equation. What do we do about Oblivion Orb? Well, there's actually a 15 AP difference that exists between these two component items in favor of Haunting Guise, and there's a 5 AP difference between Morellos and Liandry's in favor of Liandry's. So what we do here is that 5 is already pre-included in the calculation, so we need to create another 10 AP difference to get the correct damage value for this combo. So there we go. Morellos will actually do 1326 in that combo compared to the, well, depends on what his madness stack is. So let's go check the screenshot for what his madness was at when he killed Gragas. It was only at 2. Let's check that spreadsheet again. And wow, that is a non-negligible difference in damage. What do you know? Oblivion Orb is a better component item for burst. Who would have guessed? Now, the important part is to actually look at Gragas' HP value here. He's at 1336. 1278 leaves him with around 70 HP. This leaves him with 10. The fact that Gragas was pre-chunk coming into this is one of the main reasons that you didn't notice the fact that Gragas would have lived if he probably had Haunting Guise instead of Oblivion Orb. So we've looked at some specific combos, and Oblivion Orb and Morellonomicon are pretty close without even factoring in damage reduction. Let's go look at some of these against the rest of the people in the comp if he did a similar full burst combo like he did on Gragas in that previous example. Here's Aatrox's values, which we'll be throwing in here. And this is assuming that he has his build completed as well, so he does actually have the Liandry's and Morellos done. So, against an Aatrox, well, 1830 compared to 1814 and 1848. In a burst combo, Morellos just wins against this Aatrox. Well, he does have low MR. Okay, well, let's look at the Azir, who has a little bit more, but he does have lower HP, so how does this one work? It's a little bit more in favor of Liandry's, around 2 to 3 stacks of madness, and I think Syndra's combo is slower. You'll get multiple ticks. They'll be CC'd, so I think it's very easy to say that Liandry's beats Morellos against the Azir. Against the Ezreal, I think we all know where this one's going. He doesn't have any MR. We'll plug that in. Yep, it loses even at fully stacked damage with the Liandry's burn. Morellos will do more damage. And against the Yuumi, she does have some MR, but she has super low HP. And again, it's pretty much right at Madness Stack 4 that the Morellonomicon is going to be winning. So in this situation, we can see that in burst situations, Morellonomicon is either equal or outperforming Liandry's against almost every single target on the enemy team. And that's before even talking about grievous wounds and healing reduction. In this spreadsheet, I've calculated some of the healing that the enemy team comp has. Gragas Body Slam at this point in the game would heal him for 86, and if you cut that, that's 34 extra damage. A Yuumi heal without even factoring in AP, just base at rank 5 is 210, that's 84 extra damage. Aatrox is a bit of a question mark because it depends on what he's doing. Same with Ezreal, but in a fight, if they're able to get some of this healing off, it becomes a landslide victory for Morellonomicon. But Mark, come on. That's a Syndra versus healing and low MR and low HP and squishies and stuff. That's an optimal scenario for Morellonomicon. Okay, let's look at a different game. Here, we're going to look at Broken Blade's Kennen building Liandry's. He also has a Void Staff. It's relatively late in the game. So, Broken Blade's combo, if we're going to check this carefully, he goes in, pops his R, lands his EW, use his Gunblade as well. They get everyone pretty low, Stunt dies as well, the rest of the team collapses, and the fight is largely over after that dive on the initial 2 targets. That was very fast and a little hard to see everything going on, so I pulled some screenshots to help. He got his full ult combo off on them, his W and E on both targets. He did Gunblade Cody, and he killed him at 3 stacks of madness. So important to note here, Cody actually has a full Maw of the Malmortius completed, so he actually has not a bad chunk of MR built up. So let's plug in Cody's values that I've grabbed from the pro view from his side earlier. Didn't want to show that boring part. Interesting thing to note, we have a Void Staff completed on Broken Blade. Now, the way this is worded, I should be putting 0.4 in here, but there was a small calculation hiccup when we were building this, and you actually are going to put in what their end percent MR will be, not their initial one. So it should say 0.4 for the 40% Void Staff pen, but that reduces it to 60. So we put in the 0.6. It's just a small hiccup, but I've tested this to make sure this still works on a target dummy, and it's fine. So let's look at it. This is his EWR full proc R with a Gunblade proc at the end. That's the base damage, that's the ratio. That's his AP without having the Liandry's built in. There's your Void Staff, and he has Sork Boots. Well, would you look at that? Morellos outperforms Liandry's at everything that's not a fully stacked 5 Madness combo before you start it and get the full burn. Now, technically, you are going to reapply Liandry's and you will be stunned for a portion of the duration, but you're also waiting for this to ramp while you're initially going in. If we watch this replay again from Kennen's perspective on slow-mo, watch how slowly the Liandry's is updating as damage is coming out. Most of his damage is done already. The ult is off when he was at 3 stacks. So it's a little disingenuous to try and put that number at the end just because Liandry's keeps ticking. So realistically, the value's somewhere around here. and it's super close. Morellos is basically winning, and it's doing it faster because you don't have to wait for these extra ticks to come in. The reason this favors Morellos is because of how flat pen works with percent pen. This is a massive misconception in League of Legends community, even somewhat on the pro level, that somehow flat pen is bad late game. It's not, as long as you're actually building percent pen as well, because Void will push that MR down lower to allow the flat pen to be relatively effective again. If you're getting Void Staff and only getting 3 stacks of Madness like we've seen in most burst combos, Morellos actually outperforms Liandry's until 130 MR. To highlight this, let's look at what the LeBlanc has in this game. As you can see, Ryoma actually has Merc Treads and a Banshee's Veil. So let's go plug in his values and imagine what would happen if that exact combo was dumped onto the LeBlanc instead. We drop the values in that I got from his pro view. He has more MR up to 130. The Liandry's will keep ticking and it'll be stronger overall, but in a burst situation when you're trying to kill 1749 HP, this one's usually better because it all comes out right away. But we have to be fair here because there was another target in that dive, the Nautilus. Now, I checked his pro view and he actually got his Aftershock and Stoneplate values up, I believe. But I saw his MR was all the way up to 151. So we plug these values in and yeah, Morellos starts getting outperformed a fair amount earlier. And given that we saw it was slower for him to die, he got more ticks on, the Liandry's absolutely is better for killing the tank Nautilus. But you want to ask yourself, as an AP Kennen who's trying to dive on the backlines, do I want to be killing the backliners like the LeBlanc and the MF as fast as possible, or do I want to be killing the Nautilus? This is before even mentioning the final nail in the coffin, healing reduction. This is all before factoring that in. And you might have missed it because it was very hard to see, and I still miss it all the time. But if you watch very closely, check out how much healing Cody actually gets through this dive. There, that was a Syndra stun, so maybe not healing reduction applied yet, but you can maybe argue Syndra should have it. And you see 43 ticking from triple Ocean Drake Soul. But keep watching and watch his HP bar specifically very closely here. It gets ticked down, 848, 558, 177, 305. It jumped up 126. You'll see he keeps healing a little bit through this before finally dying. If there was any doubt about whether Morellonomicon is better for killing squishies, it's over. There's so much healing in this game that people don't factor in. You have Bloodline, Lifeline, Triumph, Summoner Heal, Knight's Vow, Ocean Drake ticks. These kinds of things are constantly going on, as well as passive health regen that you want to be cutting into. Even without healing enchanters, there is so much sneaky situational healing in this game. Broken Blade building Liandry's here is a worse for single rotation damage and killing backline. Okay, but Mark, you just admitted that Void Staff is the one that's kind of doing the heavy lifting there, right? What happens before you get Void? It's a great question. So let's look into an example that happened earlier on in the game. Just before that last replay, TSM was looking to get Baron. Broken Blaze doing a great job sitting in the flank position over here to potentially find backline access onto the multiple members of the enemy team. Now you'll notice he doesn't have Void Staff yet, just the Liandry's and Gunblade. So let's watch this clip and see what his combo is. Enemy team's trying to deal with him, force him out of position, good stuff, but eventually they have to focus back onto the Baron. That stun by Syndra sets up this play. He lands a Q. His Madness starts stacking early. Once he sees that, he also gets his Gunblade proc off, a W, pops his ult with his E, runs on top of him, gets a fair amount of ticks down. You'll see that his ult is still going on, so he didn't get the full ult damage here, and the Aatrox gets out alive. All right, we can calculate this. I went into Pro View, I grabbed Aatrox's HP and MR at that point in the game. I did my best estimation for how many ticks he got. I think it was 4 ult ticks onto him, and that's the combo right there. So we'll go ahead and drop this into the game, and we've gotten in the percent magic pen because there's no Void Staff built yet. So relatively high HP and MR with no extra flat percent pen going on. Let's take a look. Morellonomicon basically loses at every point after 2 stacks of Madness, and we definitely saw Kennen get way above that. He ended at around 5 stacks. The guy's also movement impaired. There was that kind of ramping time where his initial Q would have been here and his W and Gunblade proc would have been here, but overall I think it's fair to say that Liandry's probably gets the max damage there, maybe even a little bit more, and outperforms Morellos by about 100 damage. Liandry's is better there, right? Well, there is that whole grievous wound thing that we haven't mentioned yet. Let's go watch this again from Sunday's perspective. Alright, so Sunday gets stunned up and gets hit by the Q there. Now we see the first haunting Guise, Liandry's burn on him. That could be a grievous wounds. Let's see if he gets any healing over the course of this. He's getting low, he's getting chunked down, getting very low. Ooh, all the way down to 140, almost dead. Ooh, 315 summoner heal from Cody-san. Let's check how much that could have been reduced. 315 cut by 0.4 would have done an extra 126 damage. How much did Liandry's win by again? About 100? So they maybe could have actually killed the Aatrox here if he built the right item. Well, that was just one heal tick, right? Were there any others that come in? I mean, it's kind of hard to see when somebody's pressing tab in the middle of a fight, but yeah, it's going up some more. There's a 288 that he just got healed for, and a 163. Okay, so I also earlier saw 84 in there, so it would have been 340 healing cut. And if you saw how much his HP was fluctuating over the course of that replay, I'm pretty sure that dude's dead with healing reduction. The important thing to keep in mind with burst champions is not theoretical total damage over a large window, it's burst and how you can get the most out and have the lowest time to kill so other factors can't come in and interrupt your burst. This could also not even be healing, but just shielding and these other things that are getting in the way of your burst combo. DPS and damage are different things. Burst champions want really high DPS to kill in their burst combo and are a little less concerned about maximum theoretical damage. To answer the question that Liandry's fans love to ask, yes, I really do think the healing reduction will make up for Liandry's damage. Now, despite the case I'm making here for Morellos, it isn't always actually clear cut. In this early skirmish, when he doesn't even have his items completed and he's sitting on the component items, you'll see he's actually able to stack the Madness passive very effectively here against people with an okay amount of MR. He basically keeps it up the entire fight and is able to use that to do way more damage than he would have done with Oblivion Orb. Things are very fluid and each situation is going to be different. So the important thing to ask yourself is, what is my job this game? Is it to win this messy skirmish, or is it to find good flanks and blow people up? Breakpoints will shift around, things will change, but assuming that you're going to build Void, carries almost never build enough MR for Liandry's to be better in a single combo, regardless of healing reduction. Things like Kennen, who want to flank and find an ult onto backline, Syndras, who want to 100 to 0 people, LeBlanc's trying to assassinate. Wake up, everybody! If your eyes were glazed over, here are your easy takeaways. If you are an AP champion that wants to kill in a single rotation of spells, Morellos is usually better. If you are a front-to-back mage, or do not kill in a single combo, Liandry's will almost always be better. Burst item on the burst champs, DPS item on the DPS champs. Wow, what do you know? 200 years of collective game design experience actually at play, unironically making balanced items for different situations. Okay, so now we know Morellos isn't a crap item. There is one question left that I asked at the top of the video though, and it's still plaguing me. How did we get here? How did we get all the way from building too many Morellos to building too many Liandry's? Well, rather than speculate, I went to the source. I asked the pros and people around and coaches and stuff why they're building Liandry's in these situations, and something is always mentioned during this conversation. They don't want to get flamed. That's not funny and something that's really been bothering me. If you notice the wardrobe change, it's because I'm actually re-recording this part. I don't know whether to be mad or sad or exactly what I want to say, but I want to say something. The vitriolic and hyperbolic nature of the Analyst community has gone way too far. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, here's a clip from this weekend.
What the fuck are the quotation marks are a parody in themselves.
Push side lane, that means he should be able to find a flank. That means that
No, it doesn't mean that he should be able to find a flank. What is the ward setups? Who are the other champions in the game? What are the other champions doing when Aatrox just disappears into the fog of war? Shut the fuck up! Holy shit! You don't play the game, you don't talk about the game, all the information that you have comes from your players. Like, holy fucking shit. Nemesis, are you here or what? I don't know, I'm fucking tilted.
That's not professional. That's the LCK color caster acting like that because the most successful Western coach of all time simply had a different opinion. Can you imagine what it would look like if all the casters around the world started acting like this, if it's acceptable behavior? I even cut out the extremely sexually graphic description from just before it and didn't include 2 minutes later when he says, I don't want to say the R word, but who wants to interact with attitudes like that? And it's not just LS. I pulled that clip because it was pretty egregious and he's the most prominent member of this kind of community and one of the loudest. But it's not just him. It's on Twitter, it's on Twitch, it's on YouTube, it's on Reddit. And it's a number of online Twitter analysts hard flaming anyone for daring to disagree and acting like you're an idiot for doing other things different, such as buying Morellos. Some of these analysts are actually team analysts too. I have been told by one that it's griefing/inting to build Morellos anywhere except when you really need grievous wounds. Listen, that math was hard, I get it. You know, you can probably find some things I did wrong. I'm not 100% convinced every single thing I said in that video is right. And because the math is hard and pros aren't sure what's optimal, they're just building whatever stops them from getting harassed online. And that's what this is. It is harassment and bullying. I am fine with criticizing people. I'm fine at making jokes at people's expense sometimes. And I understand getting worked up and being passionate. That's not what this is. There's no jokes. It's just farming retweets and Twitch clips by berating people for differing opinions and insulting their character. People don't want to interact with attitudes like that. I don't want to interact with attitudes like that. Even though I just made this 25-minute video, a part of me doesn't want to publish it for this reason. I don't want to insert myself into a conversation like that. I don't want to see my notifications fill up after posting this video. But then I see it regurgitated by fans on Reddit who really actually think Morellos is a bad item. And as a figure of the community, it feels like, isn't it my job to kind of correct them, to chime in on this conversation? And yet my life is 10 times easier if I don't, and I just pretend that this isn't going on. These are my peers and colleagues, fellow casters and professional analysts who I don't want to interact with. The cherry on top is I see tweets patting themselves on the back for cleansing sinners every day as they cause just as many wrong build paths as they think they're fixing. And if you want to break up that echo chamber, prepare for the flame. Is this what analysis is in 2020? There's a time I would have shot this video out without having a pit in my stomach. There is nuance in League of Legends despite what these people are trying to sell you, and we'll learn a lot more of that nuance if we hear each other out instead of just shitting on each other for different opinions.